I travel a lot and collect the scariest, creepiest, mystical, and strangest stories from people's lives. Every new episode I record in my journal of horrors. Welcome to the world of events that exist every day around you, but you don't even suspect. The story is written from the words of Catherine Wilson. This event happened about 30 years ago when she was working at the city hospital. In the center of the small provincial town of Weller, there was a hospital, and it was there that Catherine worked. Catherine was a nurse. For many years, she took care of the sick and elderly residents of the town, sincerely trying to help all those in need. Catherine was a young and fragile girl. The hospital staff was understaffed, and she often had to work consecutive night and day shifts, practically without rest. She wholeheartedly loved her work and helped people, so she never complained about the difficult working conditions. However, she was not prepared at all for what happened one day in their hospital. It all started with an urgent call from a nearby farmhouse. An elderly woman was pruning tree branches in her garden when she was bitten by a rat and fell from the ladder, injuring her back. The neighbors heard a loud noise and the woman's cries. They immediately rushed to help her. One of the neighbors, quickly realizing the seriousness of the situation, called an ambulance. While they were waiting for the doctors to arrive, the neighbors took care of the injured woman, trying to alleviate her condition. According to the woman, she was bitten by a huge rat that ran out of the bushes and attacked her. When the ambulance arrived at the scene, neighbors shared details of the incident, including the rat. The paramedics quickly put the woman on a stretcher and transported her to the hospital. Catherine provided initial medical assistance upon arrival and treated the woman's leg bite. The strange rat bite left on the old woman's leg was unusually large and deep. Rats usually do not attack humans and do not leave such serious marks. Moreover, the bite area was puzzling from a medical point of view. The skin around the wound was blackened, as if burned. Catherine had never seen anything like it before. She immediately treated the bite with antiseptic and bandaged the wound. The woman's condition was stable. Doctors performed an X-ray. Fortunately, no serious injuries were detected. The patient was prescribed bed rest, constant care, and all the necessary medication. For the next couple of weeks, she was not allowed to get out of bed. Over the next few days, everything was normal and calm. Catherine showed special care for this woman because she reminded her of her mother in some way. She regularly checked on her condition, helped with all her daily needs, and spent time talking to the patient to lift her spirits and distract her from the pain. Catherine understood that attention and care could be just as important for a patient's recovery as medical treatment. Only the woman's leg caused concern. A greenish pus and a foul smell appeared at the site of the wound. It didn't look like a typical inflammation. The pus had an unusual shade and consistency. Doctors began discussing the possibility of a bacterial or viral infection related to a rat bite. The woman's condition raised more and more questions until it happened on the third night. It was around midnight. Catherine was on duty at the reception desk when she suddenly heard heavy groans. At first, she thought she imagined it. Perhaps due to fatigue or stress, she mistook the usual creaking of the wooden beams for groaning. But no. After some time, the groans repeated, and their intensity and volume only grew stronger. She shuddered, set aside the magazine she was reading, and ran down the corridor towards the sound. The sounds were coming from the room of a woman with a bite. When Catherine opened the door, horror engulfed her. The woman stood in the corner of the room facing the wall. She howled with an inhuman voice, begging for help. With each plea for help, she accompanied it with a blow of her head against the wall. The sight was terrifying. Doctors and nurses were called for assistance. They put the woman back into bed and gave her a double dose of sedative. Catherine spent the rest of the night in alarm, hardly closing her eyes, constantly listening in case the woman called for help again. However, the next morning brought even more peculiarities to the story. The woman was sober and in her right mind, but she had absolutely no recollection of what had happened. Catherine's account of the previous night startled and frightened her. She was confused. All she could remember was a recurring dream. She dreamt of a long corridor that resembled more of a tunnel, a long, endless tunnel somewhere underground. It all sounded very strange. As she listened to the patient, Catherine noticed that her hands were stained with something, and there was something black under the woman's nails. It was soil. There was no logical explanation for this. The situation repeated itself for several consecutive nights. All the staff heard horrifying sounds coming from the room late at night, sounds resembling gnawing or scratching of metal bars, accompanied by screams of desperation. In the morning, the woman still remembered nothing, and dirt mysteriously appeared under her nails. The doctors didn't know what was happening and why sedatives didn't work on the woman. They were ready to resort to the most stringent measures and restrain the woman to the bed if this happened again. But changed that night. The noise and commotion that had accompanied the last week of night shifts disappeared as if the entire hospital was holding its breath in anticipation. Not a sound came from the woman's room. Catherine felt nervous, but hoped that this time the sedative had finally worked. She checked the room several times, each time finding the woman peacefully asleep. But still, an uneasiness burned inside her. Around 4 o'clock in the morning, Catherine went for her usual rounds through the hospital. Her surprise was immense when she entered the woman's room. The bed was empty, and the window was wide open. In a panic, Catherine rushed out of the hospital trying to find the woman. Her room was on the first floor, and she prayed that nothing had happened to the patient. Catherine headed towards the inner courtyard. The surrounding darkness made the search difficult. She looked around intently, trying to spot any signs of the woman's presence. And there, among the tall bushes, the silhouette of a woman appeared. Catherine approached her, trying to understand what was happening. The woman was squatting with her back to the girl. She was digging the ground with her bare hands and stuffing it into her mouth by handfuls. Catherine was shocked by what she saw. The woman was greedily eating dirt. Suddenly, she turned to the girl and spoke in an inhuman voice. "Don't look at me! Don't look at me!" Her eyes were bloodshot, the pupils barely visible. Her hair was disheveled, and her mouth and teeth were black from the dirt. She stared fiercely at Catherine, black drool dripping from her chin. Her fingers were contorted with a strong spasm, resembling the claws of some animal. In that instant, she jumped up and ran away. Catherine was petrified with horror, watching as the elderly woman, whom she knew to be weak and sick, ran with an extraordinary speed for her age. It was so unbelievable that the girl couldn't believe what was happening. Catherine tried to chase after her, but the woman disappeared into the darkness as suddenly as she had appeared. Attempts to find her were in vain. The police were involved in the search for the woman, but there were no results. Neither the woman's relatives nor her children could be found. To this day, Catherine recalls this patient as the most horrifying and mysterious event in her life.